Hello and welcome to today's session with ACE, the English Hub, a learning platform for students of English. Today's session is a continuation of last week's Romantic Criticism and William Wordsworth. Today we'll be dealing with Wordsworth's critical work, Preface to Lyrical Ballads. Lyrical Ballads is often considered as the harbinger of the Romantic movement, and the preface is seen as the unofficial manifesto of Romanticism. William Wordsworth has given his critical view on poetry through his work Preface to Lyrical Ballads. The Lyrical Ballads was in fact a revolt against the tenets of neoclassicism. The neoclassicals made use of artificial poetic diction, satirical elements, heroic couplets, and their emphasis was on prose, reason, and rational elements. Fancy and imagination were not given importance. Wordsworth wanted to make his readers understand the deviation of his theme and style. His aim was to introduce his readers to the drastic changes in theme and style that he has used in the Lyrical Ballads. He wanted to bring about a revolution in poetic taste. Coming to Wordsworth's views on the themes of poetry, Wordsworth discarded the neoclassical themes of poetry and chose romantic themes. According to him, the themes used in poetry should be from everyday life, that is, objects, incidents, and situations that can be chosen from common life and that will be familiar to common people also. Ultimately, he advocates that subject matter of poetry should be close to one's mind, and only then will it help the reader to enjoy the poem. That is, the poem should never be distant from the reader. Diction is yet another aspect William Wordsworth dealt with. Basically, according to Wordsworth, poetry should have the ability to communicate. That is, it should be able to communicate with the common man, or it should be a bridge between the poet and the common man. He avoided the diction used by the neoclassicals. He selected natural themes and hence natural language. He wanted the language of common man or the language of the rustic people to be used in poetry. He believed that in rustic life, human passions are connected with the grand and noble objects of nature, and hence they are more noble and permanent. He was also against exaggerations and artificiality. William Wordsworth defined poetry in a unique way in the preface. He termed it as a spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions and feelings recollected in tranquility. Through giving this definition, he ruled out rationality and intellectuality in poetry. Instead, he emphasizes on the role of emotions. His poems had a purpose of purifying emotions. He gave more importance to feelings than action and situation. He also believed that poetry communicates truth. William Wordsworth describes 4 stages in writing poetry. The first one being observation. The poet observes something which creates emotions in his mind. The second one is recollection. The poet recollecting these emotions in solitude. The third one is contemplation. The poet's thoughts over the images and emotions. And the fourth one is composition. Observation, recollection, and contemplation result in poetic creation, which is called composition of poetry. Wordsworth discusses the definition, qualities, and functions of a poet. He defines a poet as a man speaking to men. He attributed the poet with these qualifications. A poet is someone with greater imagination. He is a man possessing a higher sensibility than others. He is someone with greater knowledge of human nature. He is a person possessing a more comprehensive soul who shares the feelings and emotional reactions of people accurately. He is someone with great enthusiasm for life, and he is one who possesses greater powers of communication. William Wordsworth had his own way of defining metre. He believed that there was no essential difference between the language of prose and verse. The only difference is that the poets use metre. Wordsworth always supported metre in poetry. According to him, metre provides pleasure to the reader. It also helps in communicating emotions. He was of the opinion that happiness, pathetic conditions, and painful emotions can be successfully conveyed through the use of metre. According to him, metre also gives an unusual quality to ordinary language, and he also defined that metre gives passion to the words, which in turn increases emotional intensity. Now coming to the shortcomings or limitations of the preface. Wordsworth himself is not free from criticism, and it was S.T. Coleridge with whom he co-authored Lyrical Ballads and T.S. Eliot who criticized Wordsworth. According to Coleridge, Wordsworth's language is something which is very much similar to the rustic language, and what Coleridge argues is that this rustic language will be too scanty for the expression of varied experiences. The next point is that, according to Wordsworth, the use of metre is natural, but Coleridge sees it as an artificial one. Coleridge is of the opinion that the language of poetry and prose should be different. Coleridge criticizes the preface for its obscurity and its use of elaborate and constrained diction. Another writer to criticize Wordsworth was T.S. Eliot. He pointed out that there is no such process as emotions recollected in tranquility in the creation of poetry. Eliot is also not ready to connect personality or emotion to a poem. Eliot argues that Wordsworth hasn't ever practiced his theory in his own poetry, and the example which he gives is that Wordsworth hasn't used the vocabulary and language drawn from common people in his own poems. For example, Tintern Abbey. Critics like Coleridge and Eliot considered Wordsworth's theory inconsistent with his practice or simply inadequate to be called theory. In spite of these limitations, the preface is still an important single critical work of the Romantic period. The preface to Lyrical Ballads has given importance to the value of simple and natural language. Wordsworth redefined the true nature of poetry as expression of passion and emotion. Finally, Wordsworth also brought about a revolution in the theory of poetry, emphasizing novelty, liberty, spontaneity, inspiration, and imagination. That's all for today. Log in to our Facebook page for more content. See you again next Thursday with another bite-sized lesson. Also check out our poetry readings every Tuesday. Like, share, and subscribe if you find our content useful.